Hi, welcome to Healthcare in Context. My name is Charlotte Seyfried. I am a breast cancer survivor, a caregiver, and a patient advocate, and I'm the founder and creator of charlottepxp.com. And this is my partner.
Hey, I'm Caitlyn Holcomb, founder of Wellness Communities. I'm a certified community health worker through Baylor Scott & White, and shortly after earning my MBA, I quit my job to start focusing full-time on helping people to dwell in wellness. And welcome to our series, Healthcare in Context. We call it this because contextual care matters. In fact, evidence shows that paying attention to contextual care factors improves the likelihood of positive medical outcomes by 70%.
We want to remind everyone that we are not doctors. Anything we say here is not to be construed as medical advice. Welcome back, Andrew and Ryan. It's so good to see you again. Thank you for joining us on Healthcare in Context.
Thanks for having me.
Good to be with you.
So today we're going to focus on finding your care team, finding your care physicians, and getting to developing a care plan. In that, we're going to kind of focus on the same question structure we've done, where we talk about a background and context around that situation, potential improvements you see in that process, or barriers that you might have encountered in that process, what you wish you had known going in as advice for anyone facing that now, and what made life easier. So Ryan, I think we'll start with you today. Around finding your physicians and your care team and developing a care plan, can you give us a little bit of background and context around what that was like for you?
Because of the area that I live in, there weren't a whole lot of options as far as facilities that I could go to. But one thing that was positive is that once I saw the surgical oncologist, the cancer center kind of put a team together for me. So they had a tumor board conversation. They talked through my particular prognosis, and they built that team for me, and it worked really well. And I enjoyed and appreciated all of the doctors that I had. I feel like it was the best care team out of the group that I had to choose from that could have happened. So I didn't really have to do too much in the way of building my team out. And I think I was grateful for that, because I'm not sure that I would have had the ability to do that at that particular moment in time.
And a little more context, can you help us to understand who all was on your care team, like what the roles of the different people were and why? Obviously you had an oncologist. Who else?
So I had a number of oncologists. So there was a surgical oncologist. Again, that was the person that I interacted with first. Ultimately, I did not have surgery first. So I also had a medical oncologist, and they were the person that set up and talked me through the plan for chemo, what that would look like, which drugs I was on. I had a radiation oncologist because after surgery, I had 32 rounds of radiation. And in addition to that, I also had a nurse navigator that was assigned to me. There were several nurse practitioners that were also a part of my team, and I alternated seeing the oncologist and the nurse practitioners throughout the course of my treatment. Later on, I had a physical therapist, and that was one of the few times that I actually went outside of who I was assigned to and found someone different, because the initial group that I was assigned to were not a good fit for me, and I didn't feel like I got a whole lot out of it.
That's really helpful to understand. For learning, can you help us to understand why there wasn't a good fit and how you were able to advocate for yourself to get people who were the right fit.
So at the end of my surgery, and I have a unique kind of situation because while I was diagnosed stage 4 de novo, there was a lot of question about what my actual stage was during the time that I was going through treatment. So I had all of the early stage treatments despite the fact that I was stage 4. I was considered oligometastatic because I only had a few mets and they were in distant nodes, not in my bones or other organs. So what that meant is that I was able to have surgery, which is not a thing that always happens with stage 4 breast cancer. I had a complete axillary lymph node dissection. So they took 15 lymph nodes from the left side. And I also had 4 nodes that were taken from the right side. Because of that, I had a lot of range of motion, challenges. And I was going to have radiation pretty shortly after surgery. And I had intensity modulated radiation therapy, which meant that I had to hold my breath. And the machine was like connected to my breath. So if I let go of my breath, it would stop. It also meant that I had to have my hands up over my head for a long amount of time. So it was really important that I get range of motion pretty quickly after surgery. So I saw a physical therapist. That the goal was to get my range of motion back. It was very difficult to get appointments, even though this was something that was necessary for me to be able to start radiation. And so, although I was supposed to go every week, it took almost a month for me to get my very first appointment. Then once I got there, I felt very rushed. We didn't really do a whole lot of range of motion exercises in the appointment. They did a lymphatic drainage massage, handed me some resistance bands and some pieces of paper with exercises that we might have gone over once or twice, and sent me on my way. So I didn't feel like I was getting a lot of support or attention to the things that I needed. And it just so happened that I had a friend that was diagnosed about a month after me. And we had different kind of treatment paths, but she also had a physical therapist, and she referred me to the place that she was going. And I ended up getting synced up with that physical therapist who was a breast cancer survivor. So she was like very aware of the challenges and the needs of me specifically, and is an incredible human who I still try to keep in touch with today. So it was a much better fit. I was much more supported, and she taught me so many things and got me set up with so much stuff that I needed afterwards with regards to lymphedema and all of those things. So
I have a question for you. Did you delay radiation while you were waiting because of the schedule of the first one?
no, and it was really challenging. There were, even just in getting my mapping done for the radiation, like we had to reschedule it because I was in so much pain and not able to hold the position that I needed. So we had to I had to come back the following week.
Was it your radiation? Was it your radiation oncologist that specifically talked to you about? Because we know you have a clinical background, and it sounds like you could tell the physical therapy wasn't adequate. Would you have been able to assess that without your clinical background, or did your clinical background, was that part of what helped show you that?
I think that I would have recognized that I wasn't getting what I needed. I'm not sure if I would have had the frame of mind to advocate for something different. I don't know if I would have understood that there is something better and different out there otherwise.
Yeah. Or necessarily had the vocabulary to approach it or know where to go to find different resources. But I'm glad that you found something that worked for you.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like you found that alternative resource through word of mouth with a friend.
Yeah. It was a relatively new practice. And so I think there's two things at play. One is that there is one major medical center here, and the people that are affiliated with that center are who the references get sent to. And then also, again, because she had a newer practice, so was a little bit less known. And just in the couple years since I've been through treatment, they've really blown up and expanded, which I'm happy to see.
Especially if they're doing things right that benefit the patient.
100%.
And in your situation specifically, because you had to do a certain arm movement,
Mm-hmm.
it was really, really important for you to be able to get that in time. Did you also have PT afterwards as well?
Yes, I ended up having to continue with physical therapy for a good amount of time because I developed cording in both of my arms pretty significantly. And so even after I had good range of motion back, I would still have to go in to get that treated, to get those cords broken up, and to continue with the lymphatic massage.
And for anyone who's not familiar, cording is when lots of people have different theories about what it is, including physical therapists, but it's basically scar tissue that heals in an inappropriate or uncomfortable way that limits your motion and hurts. So some people break it up, some people stretch it. It just depends on where you go as to what their theory is for dealing with it. But every time you have something done in the same region, it creates more scar tissue. So radiation, specifically beforehand, after surgery, you have scar tissue that needs to be dealt with. But after radiation, you have new scar tissue that forms because of the radiation. So both of those are great times to get PT in that area. And if you have a good physical therapist in your area and your doctor does not schedule it, remember that you need to schedule it for yourself.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And now, Andrew, coming to you. Thinking about getting your care team in place, finding your doctors in those extensions of your care team, and then developing a care plan for your fight going forward. Can you give us a little bit of background and context around what that process was like for you?
Happy to. All right. Yeah, well, I was under pretty lot of time pressure. It was a situation where, like, after surgery, they sort of investigated. They found out that it was like the highest stage, and it was pretty, getting right into the chemo as soon as I recovered from surgery was pretty critical. So I didn't have too much of a time to like really choose, and I just happened to be in a network that's connected to like a small teaching hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I'm in like the best part of the world for treatment. But then I was thinking, well, downtown has like the world famous like treatment centers, right? And am I really like best served by this like small teaching hospital, right? And it turned out that like the kind of chemotherapy treatment like for like it's pretty commonly a treatment for this particular form. There really isn't too many alternatives, right? So I decided to go with like just the path of least resistance, the small teaching hospital. And I'm looking back at it, I'm really glad that I did, because as it turned out, I actually got treatment somewhat down the line at one of these world famous like cancer centers, and the contrast actually like a lot more favorable to the small teaching hospital. And I'll tell you a little bit about like my experience at the small teaching hospital. So very intimate, small staff. They just knew you by name. I had trouble kind of getting around after like I got into treatment. So actually, my father was like just retired and would would kind of help me get around, kind of drive me to my appointments, and it was actually very important for me to like see if I could attempt to go to work like during the treatment, right? So it would be pretty much like every day of the week. You'd go for a couple of weeks, and you take a week break, then you go for another couple of weeks. That sort of rhythm, and they were so nice. They actually agreed to open up their like offices a whole hour early, like at like 7 a.m. rather than an 8 a.m. start, just to accommodate me. And the nurses became just like my best of friends. I'm like Facebook friends with all of them. My nurse, like my kind of personal care team nurse, Paula, is who I spent most of my time with. And yeah, we like very like intimate kind of relationship. And I think like one factor is too, I was like pretty young, like compared to like your average population. So like I really stuck out, I think, like, relative. It's mainly like the, kind of older crowd, right? In the chemo ward. And I was just absolutely doted on, to be honest, at this place. And, they knew kind of like what like I liked for my sandwich and my drink, my personal preferences. And they just like cater to me, because you sit there for, 3-4 hours a day, and yeah, very, very intimate. So I had like, of course, the main oncologist, like my main nurse. All the other nurses kind of knew me, too. And what I liked is you could cut a lot of corners. You didn't have to do like the check-in at like central, like, you go to the hospital the first thing in the morning, you get processed. You could kind of skip that and go right up to the oncology ward. Yeah. A lot of the kind of like administrative kind of like, steps they kind of just did away with, so that was good. And then I also had like kind of like I don't know what you call it, but I don't know, more a psychologist kind of like person I would check in with, right? They kind of had that one on staff, so I booked an appointment with them. They were great, actually, kind of, had this like existential moment, I guess, right? And that really helped me. I'm really glad that they had that. That was like an important part of my care. So it felt like real family to me, very, very memorable. Whenever I go back, everyone kind of knows my name and, hey, you're the guy that went to work every day kind of thing, which I kept up for, until the sort of the end, I couldn't do it anymore. But I will say that, so, you get really worried. You think, well, geez, should I go to these big kind of like name brand, like world famous brands like downtown instead, right, in Boston? And it was just such an emergency situation. I decided to go right with a small teaching hospital. But in addition to like the testicular cancer, they noticed like what's called a desmoid tumor way, way deep in my intestines, right? Just when they scan you, right, in the beginning. And they thought that could be issue potentially cancerous, right? And I had a friend who had like an in at like one of these like world famous like brands, and they kind of set me up with an appointment. My kind of local oncologist felt that it wasn't worth like investigating that further. The chemo was so extreme, it would kill whatever was in there anyway, and best to just proceed. And I don't know. I had my family, kind of, we debated it, and we thought, well, let's get a second opinion, right? My oncologist, fine, go ahead. And I went to this, one of the name brands downtown. Also, very good in terms of like, I would say the administration, like you get this like arm bracelet, right? And you can go anywhere you need to go. Like parking is free, and typically it's like a nightmare to park at this like area of town, right? Kind of concierge sort of treatment. But I did really you do feel kind of like a number, right? I had like this quick half an hour appointment with like this world famous like oncologist, subject matter expert, right? And this like particular whatever I had. And he pushed me to this kind of like risky kind of biopsy, actually, which my kind of local, like regular old oncologist recommended against. And I went with it. And I was like getting the biopsy, they like cut my aorta, like accidentally. I started like bleeding out. I almost died. Like on the like it was a mess. And like I'm like in the middle of chemo. I'm already like just really, really sick. And it's extremely painful. Like I recovered, obviously, right? And they stabilized me and all that stuff, but it almost went to like a very dark place. And kind of like reflecting back on that, like I had this like kind of care team at the local teaching hospital that knew me like very intimately, right? And kind of knew what support I needed to be successful, not just with the treatment, but in life, right? They knew that I had just taken this job that I was very, very excited about, right? It was a big step in my career, and it was important for me to continue that as much as I can, even though like they kind of didn't recommend it, and they were able to like reorganize the schedule, Whereas this other place, I don't know. I felt kind of it was like this like cocky kind of world famous like person who's, let's just give it a whirl and recommend this risky treatment, and it didn't work out very well. And I don't know. No one really followed up with me. Like I don't know. It was like I got a big apology from the whoever did my biopsy. Right? They kind of came into my hospital room and like you could tell they didn't want to get sued. And I'm just like so sick at that point anyway. It was just a crazy kind of event. So real contrast between that like small, intimate, like family like setting and this is, I mean, it's like you recognize it in an instant. It's a world famous brand, right? And I felt like, that intimacy, that like family kind of approach, boy, that did wonders for my like psychological health. Yeah, so big difference there.
Wow, I'm really sorry that you had to go through so much more than it sounded like you needed to go through. Obviously, if you're sitting there and you're hearing from, I mean, it's your life. So if you're hearing from somebody who's the trusted expert, yeah, you're going to go with even if it's a riskier procedure that they recommend, you're going to go that route, of course. I'm surprised that, so two things stood out to me in that. One, I love that the smaller hospital that you were talking about, that sounds like the teaching hospital, had a psychologist as part of your care team, because there's just, I mean, from hearing from all of y'all, there's so much of a mental exhaustion, among other things, and balancing it all and overwhelmed, that I could see how that's huge.
As soon as I heard that, I thought to myself, I really wish that I would have set up appointments with a therapist in the same building, or at least in the same area, so that I could have just like gone from one appointment to the other, because that would have been so helpful. So that's probably a really great tip for anyone listening.
Yeah. Or even if it's a virtual appointment, having someone on your care team to help you navigate through the mental load of it all. You mentioned the world-class facility didn't follow up with you after the biopsy went wrong. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
I think that it was a failed surgery, so they never actually were able to biopsy the tumor. Yeah, so that's why. I think the chances are pretty slim of something like that happening, like biopsy kind of, I don't know, surgery gone wrong, but it actually turns out it was like much higher, like given where like the positioning of the tumor. So yeah, but yeah, so they had no information to follow up on, right? They couldn't sample anything, right?
But I still don't understand why they wouldn't have called to check up on you, or even who prescribed you medication, since you were on chemo and you could have potentially had an infection.
Oh, I mean, I spent like a couple days in the hospital under observation, because I think with like when a artery severed like that, you can't even sleep. I had like kind of like around the clock patrol coming into my room. It was more about like making sure like I recovered right from the injury, right? And I don't know. I was again under like time pressure. It was like right back to like more chemo, right? I was sort of like in between cycles, like when I did this like biopsy, and and I do know that like they're scanning you constantly, and they did pick up on the scan that like whatever other tumor this was is also shrinking, right? And it's gone, it hasn't been observed again, right? In my sort of post surveillance, right? So in other words, like my original kind of like oncologist was right, the chemo will kill whatever it is as well. So no sense in digging after it. That turned out to be the right way to look.
That's a surprising turn, but I really appreciate you sharing the mental health aspect, and sharing that comparison and contrast of the world-class facilities can be really great, but also so can the smaller ones, especially with that personal touch piece.
Well, it makes me wonder if they just didn't have the time because they were overscheduling the doctors.
So next, I'd like to move on to focusing around potential improvements in the process of lining up your care team. I think we've already hit on a big one about considering the mental health piece of it. Potential improvements or barriers that you face in developing that care plan. Ryan, I'll come back, start with you again, and then Andrew will move to you next.
Well, one of the things, again, I didn't really come across a lot of barriers in developing this care team because I didn't have to do too much. Like, the center put things together for me. However, and this kind of ties a little bit into like potential improvements, but I was not aware at the time that if I had wanted to get a second opinion there is a major cancer research facility in North Carolina. It's just many hours from me. And I wasn't aware that if I had wanted to, I could have met with doctors there and still had my care at my local facility. And that would have been really helpful to know and consider. I'm not sure that I would have done anything differently, but it would have been nice to know that was an option. It was really important to me because I'm a single parent and I did work full time through all of my treatment. It was important that I was at a facility that was close by, where I got all of my treatment is probably 10 minutes from my house. And so it didn't even cross my mind to look at some of those other larger facilities and get input. Again, and I also didn't realize at the time it's not that I'm unique, but it was a different type of scenario with my stage 4 diagnosis and the way that it presented and the treatments that were given to me. We moved forward with the same treatment plan that I had when they thought I was stage 2B, even after they found the distant met. And I didn't realize how not normal that was in the time. Again, would it have changed anything? I'm not sure, but I like to have all of the information and because I like to make informed decisions, and that was just not something that I was aware of at the time. I will also say that while I didn't access it, I was offered a licensed clinical social worker from the hospital. Part of the reason that I didn't utilize that is because they set me up with a student, and I just wasn't super comfortable with that. So
yeah, that's fair. If you're willing to share, I'd love to hear a little bit more about why you weren't necessarily comfortable with the student, or we can just move on.
I had this inkling in my spirit at the time that it is just different. When you are faced with a life-limiting illness or cancer, there's a lot that goes into that and a lot of feelings that have to be processed that I don't think are necessarily run-of-the-mill therapy type of things. And so and my background is in psychology. I've worked in health and human services for a very long time and in social work for a very long time. So I didn't want to find myself in a situation where I was interacting with somebody that may not even have as much of experience as I did in that to walk me through those things.
Yeah, your time is already limited and you're already giving a significant amount to, as you mentioned, being a single parent, working full time, and making time for your treatments. So then at best, potentially to go to something that wouldn't be helpful, let alone if it was someone who wasn't very skilled on walking people through a unique type of trauma. That could definitely be additional burdensome.
Absolutely. And, there's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of feelings. I had a pretty short fuse at that point in time because I just didn't have a whole lot of energy to be pleasant and be palatable for other people. And even in knowing that, I also didn't want to take that out on a student. I wouldn't want to take it out on anybody, but I certainly didn't want to have somebody that was like very much still, freshly out of school or finishing up their schooling, navigating that with me.
Completely makes sense. Thank you for elaborating on that.
And I also think that it's very kind of you to not want to send them packing.
They're so important. We need them. I don't want to run them off.
Well, I was just going to say, I love the theme of self-awareness that I'm hearing from you in terms of knowing what you need and then turning around and advocating for yourself in that.
I thought it was very interesting to think about the second opinion. Andrew went and got a second opinion at one of the big hospitals and ended up doing a procedure that really almost cost you your life. But at the same point in time, Ryan was not able to get a second opinion because she didn't necessarily know she could get one. And then I personally had 3 opinions.
Something else that stood out to me with both of y'all, Andrew, you were talking about how it's downtown and it sounds like it's kind of a difficult area to get to and a difficult area to park in. Ryan, it was several hours from you. So even though we may be privileged enough to be able to drive to go get the second opinion, barring time being a limited resource, etc., it sounds like there was still a geographical accessibility barrier on getting that second opinion. But we know of other times where that is worth it. So kind of from there, Andrew, having had the negative experience of a second opinion, would you still go through, not necessarily the buyout, but would you still lean towards getting a second opinion?
Yeah, of course. Especially this was like kind of like a weird like instance, right? Like it was unusual to have to see this on the scan, right? Outside of like the cancer itself, right? And so I felt that like it called for it, right? Like my oncologist was admittedly not an expert in this like phenomenon, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
Boy, the time constraints, you are right about that. I mean, you have no time to do anything, it's enough just to manage the treatment and, try to get a little work in and, drag yourself home and, keep your spreadsheet of medicines, yeah, when can you squeeze that all in, right? That's really the difficult part. Time to think outside of just surviving and getting through one day from the next. It's a big challenge, right? And in my case, I had family members who had these contacts, right? And they kind of looked out for me, but I don't think I would have the bandwidth to even identify someone that I could see.
That makes sense. I think I had, of the 3 or the third opinions that I had, my second one actually did a telehealth appointment, and I thought, oh, this should be standard for every hospital because it would be so much easier just to have that like telehealth appointment. You don't have to battle the traffic, and then you can decide if you want to go in and seek treatment at that hospital.
I like that, like an onboard get to know you before you have to battle the traffic, find the parking. Most of them are multi-building health systems, and then go figure out which office it is. And turns out you parked in the wrong parking lot, and it's actually a different building's parking lot. And figuring all of those logistics out before you even know is this care team the right fit. So yeah, that's an interesting point, Charlotte. Thank you.
We'd like to give a big thank you to our guests, and we hope that you'll join us for the next episode. Context is everything, and healthcare and life. If you believe in what we're doing and want to support us, please remember to like, subscribe, and share our channel. Reach out if you want to be on our show, or you think we should cover another topic. What did you learn from the show today? We want to hear from you. Contact us at hcincontext@gmail.com. Leave a comment or look us up at dwellnesscommunities.com. One of the most common questions I get asked as a cancer survivor is, what should I send to my loved one who was recently diagnosed? So that's why I helped create a curated list of products at dwellnesscommunities.com in the Shop tab. It contains products that are tested and recommended by the people on our show, including me. We'll take a portion of proceeds and donate it to Undo Medical Debt. For every dollar donated, it will pay off $100 of debt. It also helps us continue to share these stories with you. We wish you wellness. And if you aren't feeling well, remember, there are people out there working hard to make you feel better. See you soon. Until then, take care of yourself and stay cozy.